On the morning of April 16, 2014, the Sewol Ferry capsized while carrying 476 people from Incheon to Jeju Island in South Korea. Of the 476 people on board, there were 443 passengers and 33 crew members. Of the passengers, 325 were secondary students from Danwon High School on a field trip. Among the 476 people on board, 304 died in the disaster. Among the 325 students, 250 died, and among the 33 crew members, 11 died. Why was the death toll so high? And why was the death ratio for passengers more than double that of the crew? What caused the Sewol Ferry to sink? The main culprit? Incompetence at multiple levels. To start, some illegal modifications were made to the ship to increase passenger and cargo space. The ship carried more than 3 times the allotted weight for cargo in order to increase profits. In addition, the cargo was incorrectly secured. The captain was 69-year-old Lee Jun-seok, who had over 40 years of experience at sea and had navigated the route before. He was hired on a 1-year contract. However, 19 members of his crew were inexperienced. At 8:49 a.m., after making a sharp right turn, the crew lost control of the ship. It became top-heavy due to the structural modifications and cargo overload and could not handle the turn. As the ship began to list, the improperly secured cargo fell to one side of the deck and it began to take on water. Attempts to launch lifeboats were unsuccessful due to the severe listing of the ship. Only 2 of the Sewol's 46 lifeboats were deployed. The first to call for help was not a crew member or an adult, but one of the students who was later found to have died. Some of the students' phones were recovered after the incident. One of the students who filmed, Park Soo-hyun, showed students initially joking around.
코드 블루 레드. 마지막으로 제 라임을 한번 뽐내야겠습니다. 내가 지금 탄 세월호. 나는 갔어야 됐어 네스호.
However, the joking soon turned to panic as the severity of the situation became clear.
보이죠? 나 무섭다 진짜. 나 이거 어떡하냐. 나 진짜 나 웁니다 나. 아씨 나 개무섭습니다 지금. 지금 나 이거 입고 있어요 지금. 나 무섭다고. 아니 구조대가 오면 얼마나 위험한 상황이냐고요. 지금 구조대 와도 300명을 어떻게 구합니까? 이거 어떻게 합니까 내가.
His video revealed that passengers were told to put on life jackets and were repeatedly told to stay in their rooms until further directions were given. However, further instructions never came. Some videos even show crew members smoking and drinking in the halls as the ship went down. The Coast Guard was slow to arrive, sent only 1 patrol boat and 3 rescue helicopters, and blocked the Navy from interfering with the rescue early on. There were about 100 minutes from the time the ship started to sink to when it completely flipped over, more than enough time for the Coast Guard to rescue all passengers. However, the Coast Guard never entered the ship, only rescuing those who had gone outside, and although they had the ability to make an announcement for all passengers to escape, they did not. If an announcement had been made at that time, it would have taken about 6 minutes for all passengers to escape. Of the 172 survivors, more than half were rescued from fishing boats and other vessels that arrived 40 minutes after the Coast Guard. The majority of the crew abandoned the ship, including the captain, who initially told rescuers that he was a passenger. While some of the crew gave their life jackets and ultimately their lives to help the passengers, the ones that did survive were sentenced between 5 and 20 years for criminal negligence and accidental homicide. The captain was given a life sentence. The media had also been incompetent. Each news outlet was competing to cover the story first, which led to an enormous amount of wrong or misleading information. At one point, it was reported that all 325 students had been rescued, easing the worries of the families of those aboard the ship who would soon learn the harsh reality. There is also evidence that shows attempts for a cover-up. 2 hours of CCTV footage was deleted during the first interrogation of the captain. Radio transmissions from the ship were also found to be tampered with. In addition, 29 seconds of data from the ship's automatic identification system used to track the ship's movements, just as the ship made the sharp turn, were mysteriously lost. It's also unknown what the president at the time, Park Geun-hye, was doing 7 hours after the initial reports of the sinking emerged. She has been blamed for the government's delayed response during the critical hours of the disaster. There was enough time and resources to easily save all the passengers of Sewol. If the captain and crew evacuated the students earlier, if If the Coast Guard had more seriously attempted to rescue passengers, and if the government got involved earlier, the end result could have been much different. 304 people essentially died for no reason. They were told to stay put and that help would come, while most of the crew escaped. Although the events of the Sewol tragedy can never be reversed, a lot can be learned from this incident so that it will never repeat itself. This is one of the reasons Soo-hyun's father decided to publicly release the unedited footage his son took as the ship went down. The ship is currently being investigated. There were initially 9 missing bodies that had yet to be recovered, but 1 had been found after the ship was salvaged. 8 remain without closure. The site of the salvage has become a memorial. Thousands of yellow ribbons fly with written messages to honor the victims and families of the disaster. I encourage you to learn much more about the incident by following the links in the description. We will never be able to reverse time or change the outcome for the Sewol Ferry. However, we can at least pay our respects to the families who lost those in the disaster and do what we can to make sure something similar never happens again.